The Firerate bug. The infamous mechanic that causes, well, towers to shoot slower and end up having less DPS than they should. But many in the tower defense community have no clue how it actually works, with some believing that it's caused solely by lag, which isn't true because it happens even without lag, and others claim that it just adds a constant value like 0.008, which is entirely made up nonsense. So I'm here to explain, how does the Firerate bug work exactly? Well, some weeks ago, I decided to test the fire rate of the DPS Accelerator and found that instead of having the fire rate of 0.1 seconds, it had a fire rate of 0.125 seconds. So then the fire rate bug just makes every tower shoot 0.025 seconds slower? Well, no. I tested the Pursuit as well, and instead of having a fire rate of 0.085 seconds, it had a fire rate of 0.116 seconds, which is a 0.031 difference. So how does the Firerate bug work exactly? Because some towers just lose more DPS than others with no apparent rhyme or reason. Well, it turns out that Tower Battles has a similar bug like this too. And yes, a long time ago, TB players discovered that the towers were affected by a Firerate bug, which also gave everything less DPS. And we know exactly how it works. So Roblox as a game runs on a tick system, which is basically a way for the game to measure time. And this isn't unusual by convention. Almost every game runs on a tick system. How it works is that every game has a set tick rate. For example, Roblox has a tick rate of 60 ticks per second, meaning that each tick lasts 1/60th of a second or 0.0166 seconds. Okay, but why does this even matter? Well, most tower defense games are coded to have a loop checking if an enemy is in range, then a line of code to tell the tower to fire. Then they use wait fire rate or task.wait fire rate to act as a cooldown. And this line of code is where the Firerate bug occurs. At every tick, or every 0.0166 seconds, task.wait will check if a tower is allowed to shoot, which is by comparing how much time has elapsed with the fire rate value of the tower. However, the game is unable to perform these checks outside of these ticks, so if you set a tower's fire rate value to something that doesn't line up with these ticks, the game will be forced to round up the fire rate value to the nearest tick. This is the entire cause of the Firerate bug. Every tower getting less DPS than they should is because of the game trying to round up fire rate values. If you give some tower a 0.01 second fire rate, it's gonna round up to 0.0166 seconds. If you give a tower some 0.015 second fire rate, it will round up to 0.0166 seconds again. And if you give a tower a 0.0167 fire rate, it's going to round up to 0.0333 seconds, which is twice as slow. So okay, then the solution is just to balance the towers with fire rate values that are tick accurate, right? Well, unfortunately no. If you set a fire rate to, let's say, 0.1 seconds, the game isn't perfectly exact, and will sometimes believe that only 0.099 seconds have elapsed, skipping a tick and causing its actual fire rate value to be 0.116 seconds. There is still the issue of fire rate buffs, which will never be applied properly with these towers with very fast fire rates. And I can give an example. In Tower Battles, the max Golden Commando deals 20 damage and is supposed to have a fire rate of 0.06 seconds, giving it 333 DPS. But due to the Firerate bug, it has a fire rate of 0.066 seconds and only 300 DPS. Now, if we give him a 75% fire rate buff from CTA, his fire rate should be 0.034 seconds and he should have 580 DPS. But we have to round up to the next tick, which means only a fire rate of 0.05 seconds and only 400 DPS. That's 180 less DPS than what he's supposed to get. If you want to try calculating the fire rate values yourself, take the advertised fire rate value, apply any fire rate buffs, then multiply it by 60, then round up the product to the next integer even if that product is already an integer, then divide by 60 and the quotient will be the actual fire rate value. This formula works for Tower Battles and most TD games, but unfortunately there's one small catch. It doesn't work for TDS. In TDS, the Accelerator has an advertised fire rate of 0.1 seconds. Based on the Firerate bug formula, the Accelerator should have a fire rate of 0.116 seconds. But remember when I performed an in-game test, I found that the Accelerator had a fire rate of 0.125 seconds. So what happened? Did I test them properly? Or is the formula wrong? Well, I and some others decided to do some more tests and found that the accelerator does indeed have a fire rate of 0.125 seconds, so no mistakes were made in the testing process. And the fire rate bug formula works completely fine for tower battles, it's not incorrect either. The simple answer is that TDS is differently coded, so the fire rate bug will function differently. And it does function differently in the strangest of ways. To restate, the Excel has an advertised fire rate of 0.1 seconds. If it were in tower battles, it should have a fire rate of 0.116 seconds. But in actuality, it has a fire rate value of 0.125 seconds. Somehow, the TDS fire rate bug is more severe than tower battles. But not only that, the fire rate value of 0.125 seconds doesn't line up with any ticks. So what's going on here? I also tested the Pursuit, which has an advertised fire rate of 0.085 seconds, and if it were in tower battles, it should have a fire rate of 0.1 seconds, but in actuality, it has a fire rate value of 0.116 seconds. Well, how this fire rate bug even works just went beyond my knowledge, and I didn't really care enough to bother experimenting any further than this. But a few TB players, Fiheron, Vikin, and Fast, were curious about how this fire rate bug operated, so we all worked together to figure out a formula. Of course, that meant using whatever knowledge we had, plus copious amounts of miserable in-game testing. After all, if we tested enough towers, there would be enough clues to figure something out. Unfortunately, it wasn't very easy because the TDS GUI is just terrible. It doesn't update damage dealt perfectly, which could affect the values we got from testing. And there weren't many beefy enemies that had zero defense and wouldn't stun towers, except for the Actor 3, which has this annoying hitbox, which made it difficult to see his health bar. As for theories, at first we thought that maybe the animations affected fire rates, but that turned out to be wrong. And I had a silly theory that TDS runs more than 60 ticks per second, but that was also wrong. Instead, Fiheron and Fast made a groundbreaking discovery. The accelerator has an alternating fire rate value, or at least it looks like it. When examining a recording of the accelerator frame by frame, we found that it tends to shoot every 7 or 8 ticks. But this pattern wasn't entirely consistent because it would sometimes repeat or be delayed a tick. I'm not entirely sure how this behavior works, but what matters is that over a long period of time, this will eventually average out to a certain fire rate, which is 0.125 seconds, which is probably all we have to worry about. And not every tower seems to be affected by this. For example, the Pursuit doesn't have this alternating behavior when we checked it out. I was hoping to come up with a better explanation for why this happens, but this is just an incomprehensible situation, so the best I can do is explain how to calculate the true fire rate for TDS. Basically, take the advertised fire rate value and apply any fire rate buffs, but for this example, we'll pretend there aren't any fire rate buffs. Next, multiply your fire rate by 60. If the product is not an integer, then round up to the next number and add 1. Then divide by 60 again, and the final value will be the true fire rate. Otherwise, if the product is an integer, then add 1.5 to it, then divide by 60 and that will be your true fire rate value. But if you hate calculating, then don't worry. Fiheron used AI to make this online calculator to do it for you, and I'll link it in the comments. And if you're curious about the overall effect of the fire rate bug, then I can show you some pretty good examples. For example, the CTA buffed Golden Soldier is supposed to get 140 DPS, but thanks to the fire rate bug, it only gets 103 DPS. For comparison, the CTA buffed Golden Scout is supposed to get 81 DPS, but since it shoots rather slow, it only lost a little bit of DPS, leading to its actual DPS being 78, which isn't as bad. See that? If you're wondering why everyone is saying the Golden Soldier sucks, it's because of this. He isn't properly given his buffs, so he ends up being a much more expensive Golden Scout with nothing to show for it. But even without comparison, the Golden Soldier still suffered greatly from this. He lost about 37 DPS, so if you spammed 40 of him, that is a total of 1480 DPS lost. I can do more towers like the CT buffed Golden Crook boss, which loses 155 DPS, so if you placed 5 of them, that is 775 DPS lost. And the CT buffed Turret, which lost 260 DPS, if you place 3 of them, that's 780 DPS lost. And the CTA buffed regular minigunner, which lost 53 DPS, so if you place 40 of them, that is 2120 DPS lost. And the CTA buffed gold minigunner, which lost 60 DPS, so if you place 40 of them, that is 2400 DPS lost. And finally, the CT buffed accelerator, which lost 220 DPS. So placing 5 of them means losing 1100 DPS. This is a serious issue that needs to be dealt with, yet TDS seems to have better things to be spending their time on. And this is not impossible to fix. This bug is fixable. There's a video made by Nashi where he showcases some methods to fix the Firerate bug, which I will also link down below. So why can't TDS seem to fix it? Well, maybe the way it's coded just doesn't allow for an easy fix, but not only that, I just don't think it's a priority to them. I mean, even if it's not fixed, the game just functions alright. People don't really seem to care if they get less DPS because this is just a game for casuals. And maybe they find it easier to balance the meta that way, because if the Firerate bug suddenly got fixed, then that would require a whole host of new changes. Simply put, it just probably isn't worth it as a business move. Anyways, before I go, for any of the TDX players who are curious if TDX is affected by the Firerate bug, well, I asked John himself, and he basically said no, but I haven't tested any TDX towers to actually confirm anything. But that's all I have to say for now. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, sub, and share. I'm Super Z, and thanks for watching.